Imagination. A dream can be a dream come true. With just that spark from me and you.
Just thought I'd like to have a chat about one or two things. I begin with my books on poetry, and they're my earliest rhyming verse for the serious mind. So two of those books. And then I have these three books, a trilogy referred to as the Summer House trilogy, and it concerns a small company of domestic pets that can talk and plan great adventures despite their amusing character faults that are always getting in the way. So it gives you some idea what happens when your pets go out and have a different life altogether. What have we next? Oh yes, this is another book that my wife and I have just completed, called The Storyteller. And there's 36 boys' own adventure stories in this book, written to stimulate the imagination. We were thinking about young people, not for children, but for young people that seem to be rather detached from their imaginations, because there's many problems in society due to the strictures and redirections that people now have to take. Anyway, so that's that book. What else do I have? Oh yes, we have this little problem. Pets that get trapped by pet doors. And we've been to the big Birmingham show for cats many years ago, and we got enormous interest in our designs, and many people came forward to write down the stories of their problems. So it is serious, needed to be dealt with, and principally that's what we do. We see a problem and we deal with it, but it's not that easy. So here is a picture of that, with a cat passing through. Now then, for my serious books, again, I have pursued the serious side of life because there are nightmare anomalies in human nature which are addressable, but it never happens. So really it's this collection pursues a serious journey into the ultimate of all realities. That little design gives some idea of what I'm referring to. I have a reason for these eclectic wanderings. that hopefully will be self-explanatory as we go along. Thank you very much. Moving on, I should like to display a few more of the fleeting diversions in the life of my wife and me, and through this perhaps remind us all that there are byways to explore that can help us to remain balanced whilst living in a society that is not. The Australian Aboriginal deals with this through their spontaneous back to nature walkabouts, which is also a way of expressing some personal control over their own lives, and which helps to counter the maladies that modernism places upon them. One of mankind's baser continuances into modernism is disclosed through the way in which the excessive, intrusive directives and strictures generate stress within a populace. Moreover, the extent to which this is happening is then noted by the degree through which a nation's mental health problems have intensified. There are times when mankind falls into collective chaos, and where our personal choices must then follow the needs of the moment. I can still recall my adaptive experiences during the collective human chaos of the 1930s and 40s. By the age of 9, home had often proved more dangerous than our air-raided London streets, though on the lighter side I had my bedroom window television. It used to light up unfailingly to the sounds of approaching German bombers, followed by the seeking searchlights, arcs of tracer bullets and exploding anti-aircraft shells as the Germans offloaded their deadly cargoes. When the V-1 rockets began their daily appearances in our skies, it put everyone on edge, wondering who would be the next target. One sunny lunchtime, the V1 took away 4 houses and their occupants from the end of our street, and I never did find the final landing place of the potato and peeler I was working with in the garden at the time. With the eventual arrival of the V2 rocket, one paid us a visit whilst we were all asleep. It jumped us out of our beds, and things crashed all around the house. In the morning, we discovered a crater 35 feet deep in a nearby street and massive property damage. This constant warring was having its effect on many wartime boys, and who could now find all too easy access to explosive material. Our local paper warned parents that some young lads had recently been blown out of their garden sheds. Though as a fellow bomb maker, I couldn't understand such carelessness. I was always careful to blow mine up in a culvert beneath the local road. My friend Trevor Bayliss actually blew his next door neighbour's chimney pot off. I should add that we did grow out of that habit. Later in life, Trevor was honoured by the Queen, but not for blowing the chimney pot off.
Oh, 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 it's a lovely war.
With army camps and an airbase within easy reach, my friend Johnny and I soon became experts at wriggling through the barbed wire defences that were designed to keep out the deadly enemy. On several occasions, we even reached the group of seated airmen awaiting their scramble alert to their nearby fighter aircraft. They were really envious of our barbed wire achievements that they could not use themselves when arriving too late back at camp. In the summer months, I often used to see German prisoners on the site selling toys that they had made, and they were really brilliant.
Hänschen klein ging allein in die weite Welt hinein. Stock und Hut steht ihm gut, ist ganz wohlgemut.
Some of my DIY adaptations to needs arrived most unexpectedly from my friends Hotspur comics, such as the story of Wilson the athlete. Well, that really started me training and toughening up, which soon paid dividends. From that time onwards, I could take the leather belt on my bare rear end in silence until the ranting perpetrator collapsed with exhaustion. But as it was wartime, millions of people were having their own lives torn apart. So by comparison, I was probably no worse off than anyone else. I discovered later that the Hotspur comics had even more to offer. One gave instructions on how to learn the Australian crawl swimming stroke, and I knew that this was only going to happen if I did something about it. Oh dear, I was off again on another teach yourself dedication. I began by practicing the gyrations laying on a plank of wood. Once confident, I made my way to the nearby Grand Union Canal with Joan, my 10-year-old sister, as safety officer. She was in charge of the broomstick, the end of which was a length of string connected to me. This was her fishing rod and kept me afloat as the arms and legs gyrated systematically. After several successful attempts at this, the safety officer followed my request and disconnected the safety line. Luckily, I had held my breath and the canal bottom did seem quite interesting. And I was soon to find a new underwater hobby without a safety officer. It took longer to achieve the surface swimming. I sometimes earned a few pennies at the local scrapyard separating coloured glass bottles ready for recycling. But one day I noticed that the price of lead was very high due to wartime needs. More to the point, there were adjacent fields that were once used for shotgun practice, and I had noticed how much spent shot lay in the dry, loose soil. So began the next DIY adventure. Armed with soup scoop and an old iron pot filled with lead shot and earth, I got a fire going. Of course, the melting lead pooled to the bottom of the pot and the unwanted earth was scooped out. The molten contents were then poured into the recessed side of a dry house brick to create the occasional ingot, for which I received a good price at the scrapyard. After all, there was no life unless I was creating it. Following an episode of scrubbing the floors of our 3-bedroom house 7 times, and then escaping through the first floor window, I spent the next few weeks sleeping in the nearby woods. After that, I made plans with a friend to venture forth into the wider world. The eventual outcome of that adventure would see us at the mercy of the River Thames at Gravesend on a racing ebb tide into the rotating propellers of an offloaded ship. At the age of 14, I was put to work on my father's open field building site. It was 1947 and the cruelest winter on record, and had closed down the building industry, but not for me. I spent the whole winter working on the open field, underdressed and freezing. My mother always took my £1 wages, giving back £0.50 to me, saying, "You buy your own clothes with that from now on." However, that's the way it seemed to be in those times, so I just got on with it. At the age of 15, I planned my escape towards better things by visits to the head office of the P&O shipping line. Eventually, probably out of frustration, I was asked to return when I was 16 and did so the day following my birthday. Several weeks later, they kindly found a place for me in the Gravesend Sea School, and where I earned my seamanship certificate. So within months, I was on my way to Hong Kong aboard the SS Corfu. As my father would not have given his permission, I had saved him the trouble of signing his consent form by doing it for him. Then the National Service claimed me for 2 years as a physical training instructor, and I later became the individual fencing champion for the British Army of the Rhine, BAOR, and sent to appear in the Royal Tournament at Earl Squad. I still don't know how I bumbled into all of that. I only began fencing because I was bored and have shown no interest since. Perhaps it would stand as another interesting example of the greater possibilities that can arise when we sensibly move off course. Later, while still in my 20s, my friend and I used to meet at Runnymede during the weekends to hone our balancing and acrobatic skills. Some of them later became professional and toured the world with their act, along with doing stunt work in many major films. Others achieved in other ways. One became chief engineer for a British blue chip company, another the owner of the largest three-ring circus in the United States. And our friend Trevor Bayliss invented the wind-up radio for Africa and eventually achieved the OBE and CBE from the Queen.
Here comes summer, school is out, oh happy day. Here comes summer, I'm gonna grab my girl and run away. Here comes summer, we'll go swimming every day and let the sun shine bright on my happy summer home. Well, school's not so bad, but summer's better. It gives me more time to see my girl who walks through the park beneath the shining moon. And when we kiss, she makes my flat top curl. It's summer, I feel her lips so close to mine. Here comes summer, when we meet our hearts entwine. It's the greatest, let's have summer all the time. Oh, let the sun shine bright on my happy summer home.
Here comes summer.
Here comes summer, almost June, the sun is bright.
Here comes summer.
Here comes summer, drive-in movies every night. Double features, lots more time to hold her tight. So let the sun shine bright on my happy summer home. Well, I've longed to hold my girl beside me, sit by the lake till 1 or 2. she's willing, we'll go steady right away. Oh, let the sun shine bright on my happy summer.
I had a semi-professional speciality act at that time and ran my own business. I also enjoyed singing as a tenor and performing in various shows. My friends and I took camping holidays together abroad, including Ireland and the lakes of Killarney, for which I had built 2 kayaks. Suffice to say, we all still keep in touch today, though with the sad loss of a few along the way. I like to recall my Irish adventures through its music and that lovely ballad Danny Boy that I have so often sung.
Danny boy, the Christ upon the south boy, from glen to glen and down the mountainside. The sun is gone and all the dirt is morning. It's you, must go when I must fly. Like on back when summer's in the meadow, or when the valley's hushed and white with snow. It's I'll be here in sunshine or in shadow. Oh, Danny boy, I love you so.
the ensuing years, I emigrated to Australia and was joined later by my fiancée, Anne. We were married on the Gold Coast in Queensland. During my early arrival to the Gold Coast, I took a fanciful journey hundreds of miles northwards to Rockhampton, and then westwards for several days along wild and rugged tracks until I reached the equally isolated sapphire mining region of Anarchy, and it was there that I met an amazing old miner. We became friends, and after a few bottles of my cold beer, he opened his baccy tin for me to admire his wonderful collection of sapphires. His courageous story is now told in one of my books. In the early weeks of 1969, my wife and I began our 28,000 mile adventure around the wild and barren places of Australia. We had been told never to stop for anyone, as these places were not policed and we had no radio communication to help out in the isolated bush. However, hundreds of miles from civilization, 4 men flagged us down. Their car needed repair and they had no tools, but luckily I did, so they were soon on their way. They were very fortunate that we had arrived because they had run out of water and were at the point of drinking the contents of the car radiator. Had we not stopped, they would have died within 2 days in the soaring heat. However, they never noticed the tip of the rifle from our vehicle window aimed in their direction by my wife, just in case. There is much more to that adventure yet to be written. We returned to England many years later and lived in London until we retired. We moved to Dorset for a few years before venturing towards the Mediterranean. My wife joined a musical company during this time and performed in many shows, some of which I also took part in.
They took the whole Cherokee Nation, put us on this reservation, took away our way of life. Tomahawk and the bowie knife, and all the beads we made by hand are nowadays. They took the whole Indian nation and put us on this reservation. Cherokee people, Cherokee tribe, so proud you lived.
Well done, guys and girls. Fantastic. Now, if you fancy having a go yourself, and I was trying it in the wings, then catch up with Don and the Sizzling Country Dancers during their nationwide tour. And good luck with it.
A swing getting slain for the love of the queen. Some great Shakespearean scene where a ghost and a prince meet and everyone ends in mincemeat. The gang may be waving the flag that began with a mystical hand hip hooray. The American way, the world is the stage is a world of entertainment.
On our eventual move to the Mediterranean. She also accompanied me whilst I sang ballads. And is more of a classical pianist, having taken her exams at the Royal College of Music. Although at 21 she flew the family nest for a while to learn her language skills whilst working in Germany. We spent some time in Thailand so that we could fulfill a deep held wish to be at one with the glorious tigers and leopards. Back in the UK and more active redirections, our new home required some new additions. So in my usual single-handed way I began the new constructions. Of course, this is just another example of those infinite possibilities residing within us all when we dig a little deeper. imagination, and this has been created on this table, and it's now time to move it somewhere. So let's see what problems that will cause me. I think we have about 70 kilos here, I suppose. That go on there, and that goes on there. That's it. These are the legs, and these just come straight out of my head. I never do plans or anything. The weight of this, when the legs are in position, sit upon these shoulders, and when these legs are positioned, the weight drops onto these shoulders, and then this drops in position so that they can't splay that way, and I'll be doing the same through to the other ones that stop them splaying that way, so they get locked in position. And really, this is all about individualisation, really, and which seems to be getting markedly more unpopular nowadays. This is my main driving force in everything I do, and the value of the independent thinking mind, the open mind. Referring back to matters mentioned earlier, we have displayed our safety pet door designs at the Birmingham and Earls Court exhibition centres. A 45-minute survey produced 58 conventional pet door injuries, which were all signed and addressed by each person, with many requests to begin production. The Cyprus banking debacle destroyed the manufacturing of the safety pet doors. I had designed them specifically to remove the conventional pet door entrapment problem. Furthermore, this is all done without thoughts of personal gain. I write books also with the same thoughts in mind. Strangely, 70 of these books, Storming the Citadel, a critique on mankind's lesser inclinations, were posted and freely donated to philosophical societies around the world with a request for acknowledgement of receipt. Over a year has passed and no such acknowledgement was ever received, which invites a very interesting thought. In Malpiphany terms, my writing has gone much further in their critique of mankind's lesser inclinations, negative urges. They also provide startling evidence that an abstruse intervention has presided over those emotional urges throughout all times, and doing so through clairsentient whisperings, induced notions, which we imagine are our own design. However, not only have my investigations shed light upon something infernal, but also that it is palpably non-forgiving to anything that confirms its presence. Evidence of this reality has manifested upon me countless times by means of illogical, noxious activity and astonishing life-threatening intrusions, detailed in my book. The wider picture also reveals that science, in all its clever creativity, has been steered unwittingly throughout all time towards a specific conclusion. The late Professor Stephen Hawking indicated that science is steering mankind towards the creation of a new cybernetic life form that would bring about mankind's final extinction. We can only blame ourselves for this. We had turned away from our guiding supraordinate, God, far back in time, when all people shared the same skin colour. There is only one way back to our Creator, one that leads us into wider consciousness through that of Dante's Divine Comedy.
And that's all, folks.